I think it's a really important moment in our nation's history to start thinking about some of the emerging international security questions of the 21st century. In the last 15 or 16 years, we've had a couple of truly momentous events in the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, and our policymakers were kind of floundering about for more than a decade trying to figure out what the post-Cold War world would look like. And then, of course, 9/11 announced that we were indeed living in what many thought was a different world, and our policymakers have determined that we have a certain set of national and international security priorities that are focused around terrorism and weapons of mass destruction and other subjects. But I've really detected in recent months and years that the dialogue about national and international security is broadening once again, that it's not restricted to the great power politics that really defined the Cold War period, nor is it only about the questions of terrorism and rogue states and weapons of mass destruction, which is really much in the way that post 9/11 world has been described. I thought today's conference brought to the foreground a number of emerging issues. One of them being the rise of China and the implications that that's going to have, and whether as China becomes a great power, it's already a regional power, but as it becomes a great power and potentially a superpower, what will its strategic orientation be? Will it be a geopolitical rival with the United States, or will it be a strategic partner in economic and security cooperation in Asia? I think that the world is likely to face more countries in the near future that have nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, and that's something that will have to be dealt with and managed. I think that the rise of groups like Al-Qaeda probably demonstrate that transnational extremist groups are something that the world community is going to be having to deal with for quite some time. Right now, obviously those groups have a radical Islamist bent, but one could imagine in the future transnational organizations that commit terrorism having a different ideological orientation. Those are all kind of threats that are already on people's radar screen, but there's a whole host of other threats that are new or which people haven't talked about as much, including the very real dangers that climate change is likely to pose over the next 100 years. I think scientific consensus is now decisively in favor of the notion that humans are having a fairly profound impact on the climate, and I think events in Southeast Asia and in New Orleans remind us that human societies are very vulnerable to extreme weather and natural disasters, and if climate change makes events like hurricanes and droughts and floods and other events more likely, it's going to have a dramatic effect on the national security even of wealthy countries like our own. The spread of pandemic disease is another security issue that people have talked about today. Historically, pandemic diseases have killed tens of millions of people. The HIV/AIDS pandemic is already claiming millions of victims, and a lot of people are concerned about avian flu and other possible diseases. Lastly, there are a number of vulnerabilities that are created by the globalized economy, whether that be the fact that globalization is bringing more prosperity and raising living standards of a lot of individuals. Those individuals are also consuming a lot more energy, and whether we will experience sometime in the next decade or two a substantial energy crunch. And then there's the vulnerabilities that are created by the fact that we are incredibly interconnected, and the disruptive effects that individuals who use cyber terrorism or other technologies to disrupt our interconnected economic system. So there's a whole host of kind of new issues that don't really fit in the old mold that I think this project is really focusing on.